Hello, everybody. It is me, Damian Ahrens, and I am here with another episode of my podcast, Ahrens Analytics. And in this episode, I'm going to be diving into this novel that I read for Miss Winter's Introduction to Humanities class. The book name is How She Died, How I Lived by Mary Crockett. And we're going to be talking about how this book explores themes of justice, morality, and survivor's guilt as a main narrator in the story. That's basically all the book is about. It's kind of a boring book. And how it connects to the main idea of the humanity jurisprudence. And with me today, I have my friend Connie, who's going to help us dive into these big ideas by asking me some questions that, he's just curious about. So thank you for being here, Connie.
All right, thank you. It's an honor to be on Ahrens Analytics. I've heard a lot about this podcast. It's one of the best in the nation. All right, so just thanks for having me again. And this is such an important book, and I know it raises some tough questions for you about justice, punishment, and just how we deal with crime in society. And so we'll just start with the basics here. Just get a little into it. Just start off with a summary of the book. All right, so can you just summarize the book, How She Died, How I Lived? Just tell us what it's all about and what you thought of it.
So this novel, it follows it's actually an unnamed character, unnamed 17-year-old protagonist, and she's haunted by the murder of one of her friends and classmates, Jamie Strand.
My God.
It was, a girl from her town in her class, and she was brutally, it was pretty bad, pretty graphic. She was brutally killed by a boy named Kyle.
Kyle, dude.
And a year, so the book, it fast forwards, a year, kind of it talks about when she died, but then it fast forwards a year and, where everybody's at now. So, a year before, so basically how it happened, Kyle, he texted 5 different girls, including the protagonist of the book, the narrator, asking them to hang out, and only one of them, which was Jamie, her classmate, she was the only one that said yes. And, like I said, later that day, she was killed in a horrific act of violence. It was, like I said, it was pretty bad, and ever since, the protagonist has been basically consumed by grief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
And survivor's guilt, like I talked about in the intro.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
And basically the question she asked in the book through the whole thing is why Jamie and why not me? That's basically what I would say one of the main themes is of the book.
Yeah.
And moving more into the book, as the anniversary of her murder approaches, and a year later, that's when his sentencing was. So as his sentencing draws near, the protagonist, she finds herself basically obsessed with the case.
Yeah.
She's filled with rage at Kyle, and she struggles how to understand why he did what he did. And while the town wants to see justice served, obviously.
Yeah.
And the opinions they're divided. Should he get the death penalty? Should he spend life in prison? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the protagonist, she basically plays with her own beliefs about justice and whether or not revenge would actually be peace.
Yeah.
But and at the same time, she's also dealing with personal relationships and stuff like that. She begins to get distant from her best friend, who she doesn't really understand the protagonist emotional being and how she is.
Mm-hmm.
But she does remain a constant source of support.
Yeah.
She also does have a complicated relationship with her ex-boyfriend. He's trying to reconnect with her, but she doesn't feel like she's changed too much for them to work out, whatnot. But the person, actually, this is the crazy part, this is probably the only good little plot twist of the book.
Yeah.
the person she connects with most is actually Charlie, which was Jamie's ex boyfriend, the chick that died.
Yeah.
Yep, her ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
And he's also like kind of in the same boat as her. He's grieving. He's grieving, and he's like full of anger, and like that's what brings them together is like their shared pains.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
basically.
Sure.
And like as they spend time together, they hang out, whatever. Their bond like it deepens, and the protagonist begins to like question whether she actually likes Charlie, or if she's just like, or if she's drawn to him because he's in the same like, I don't know, like she's drawn to him because of the tragedy that they both have.
Yeah.
And like throughout the novel, she reflects on Jamie not just like as a victim, but as a person. She like imagines who she was, she dreams about it, what she might have been thinking in her last moments, and they're intrusive thoughts, and they also like push her to confront her own fears about like the fate and the purpose. And like so then as the sentencing date arrives, her reactions they meet a boiling point. She struggles with the idea that in some way, like the other 4 girls were chosen to live while she was chosen to die.
Okay.
Like it just doesn't it doesn't make sense to her.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. And like she faces like the difficulty of like the reality that any punishment that he serves, it's not going to undo what happened.
Yeah.
And by the end of the novel, she finds like a perfect resolution like to her grief. She begins to like come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
And she realizes that like she can't let her life be defined by his crime.
Yeah.
Or like how close she was to it. Yeah. And instead she makes a conscious choice like to live. Yeah. Not just because Jamie didn't get the chance, but because she deserves to.
Yeah.
And she understands that like the grief and like healing it's going to be a process, and like she's never obviously going to forget Jamie, but she like realizes that she can't let her past control her future.
Yeah, that'll just end up like no good.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very deep and like emotional. The book is like trauma and like the survival's guilt and like just how complex like justice is in that sense. So yeah, I don't know, that's basically the book summarized a little bit. I don't know, I thought it was a lot of the same thing throughout the book, like talking about them dying, it happened so fast, and the rest of the book was just her trying to figure it out. It was kind of, I don't know, it wasn't a terrible book.
Yeah, I know. That was pretty powerful. Like, I can tell that this book is like really deep in the emotional part. You know, like you really get to know the characters through the emotions and stuff like that. Like, it obviously focuses and like connects to that a lot, and just how like the real world like legal issues like actually work and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's like, it's not about what happened, it's how like the people process it, you know. And like obviously the narrator wants justice for Jamie, but she doesn't really know like what that should look like.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to like another big question I have for you. Like, what do you think the justice actually means in this case? What do you say?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. Like, because a lot of people think of justice as just like punishing the guilty, like punishing the person that did it, and making them suffer.
Like that,
But like it can also mean like healing and understanding and like preventing future crimes. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get where you come from. You can't just like, it's like there's like a fine line, you know. You can't just do one thing or the other. You know, it's tough. So, why don't we talk about Kyle? He killed Jamie. Now he's facing the legal system, which can be a jumbled up mess. What happens with him, whatever. So, what kind of justice does the book suggest he deserves? What do you think they want to happen to him?
So, like in the book, they make it really interesting because it doesn't give like a clear answer.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, the opinions they vary. Everybody's opinion varies in that town or what they think. Mm-hmm. Because like some people believe he should get life in prison, death penalty maybe, and like a good handful of people think he should have a chance at like recovery.
Yeah, trying to get the next step. Yeah, that's really hard though. Sometimes like he killed someone, and a lot of people don't think he should have a chance at recovery. But people
Right.
can change and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also hard because he did murder someone. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like something we see in real life too. It's a fine line you gotta choose, right? So we have two major approaches, right? The punitive justice, where punishment is the main goal, and the restorative justice, which focuses on recovery.
Yeah, and that's kind of where like the humanity jurisprudence comes in. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. All right, so why don't we get into that a little bit more? Let's break it down. So what is the humanity jurisprudence?
So what I have written down here, it's the idea that law should be based on like ethics and like compassion and just like a deeper understanding of the human behavior instead of focusing on just like punishment when you're talking about jurisprudence. Like it looks at like the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like whether they can change and like what justice means for like not just the victims but like the families and like the society as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I understand. So how do you think that would apply to Kyle's case? Like what would you say like that looks like for him?
So if you look at it from like a straight purely justice standpoint,
Yeah.
he should probably get the maximum sentence,
Mm-hmm.
probably life in prison or like death penalty.
Yeah.
But like if you really look at it from the humanity jurisprudence, like that perspective,
yeah,
like it makes you think of like, is he capable of remorse? Like,
yeah,
can he recover from this? And like, what punishment will actually bring true justice, not just legal justice, but
yeah,
like even the emotional justice for the narrator, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from because, he obviously murdered someone. Is he really capable of remorse? He took someone's life, so it's
Right.
kind of hard with that.
Yeah.
So, it is a pretty tough debate. And I guess some people they believe that certain crimes are unforgivable. Like obviously he murdered someone, so I mean a lot of people probably say it's unforgivable. While others believe that even some of the worst criminals could have like a second chance.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's what like most or some legal systems focus on recovery more than punishment.
Yeah.
Like I was looking up some stuff about like this book and like punishments and stuff like that, whether like some countries do it differently. And actually in Norway, some murderers usually get the chance to readapt into society instead of just facing like the maximum punishment. And like, yeah, their goal in like Norway or like countries like that, I don't know what other countries do it, but
Yeah.
their goal is to like prevent future crimes rather than just locking them away and like, all right, you're done for. You've made one mistake. Like that was pretty bad, and just locking them away forever.
Yeah. I feel like comparing it to here, the U.S. system feels a little bit more harsh. It feels like many times with murders, they don't really have a second chance. Many of them are just locked away and stuff, which is harsher than for example Norway.
Yeah, like the U.S. system is. It obviously, I think most of us know that it leans towards like a more
for sure
like longer prison
sentence,
sentences. Yep, and like death penalties in some states. But like even here, we're seeing more discussions about restorative justice, like especially for like young offenders.
Yeah, for sure. I guess if they're younger, they're less developed, so I
Yeah,
feel like they should have a better or
right.
more of a chance to get that
Yeah,
restorative.
exactly. That second chance.
Yeah, second chance. So, if how she died, how I lived was real life, do you think Kyle could be rehabilitated, or do you think he's really like a lost cause? You think?
It's like that's a pretty big question, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't really have that much of a clear answer. I'm not really sure because the book, it'd be different if it was real life because you would probably know how the dude is thinking, but the book doesn't really say whether he feels remorse. Like it was actually super weird. Like I don't know, 1 week like before it happened, he was like, "Yeah, you guys are gonna see me front page of the paper one day, and the next week he killed somebody and was on the front page of the paper, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of adds into like, does he feel remorse, blah blah blah. But yeah, if he doesn't, then the punishment should be severe, because I mean, he doesn't really feel remorse. But if he does change, then you kind of have to think of like, what's the right balance between like justice and like redemption and like what he can do, you know? So it's kind of a tough question because they don't really establish that.
You know, like I say like other crimes, you know, like I guess lesser crimes than murdering someone. I think people definitely deserve like a second chance, but with murder, you know, it's really hard. Like, do they actually deserve it? You know, they took someone's life.
Exactly.
Like,
that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So yeah. So after, you know, all this discussion, what do you think like the main takeaway is from this book? What would you say?
The main takeaway is probably that justice is very complicated, because as most people think about justice as just laws, and that's not all what it's just about. It's also about the people's emotions, their morality, and the book kind of makes me, or people who read it, makes us like question whether like just punishment is enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that one. And you know, that's like an important conversation to have. So whether we're talking about the books or real life cases, it's crucial to think about why we punish and like what the justice really means, because I don't think people know that there's a lot more like that goes into it than just law, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is like the best thing we can do to keep asking these questions. Like, there's no easy answer, but like, to me, this book really opened me up to exploring like the complexity of justice and how it's so like, you don't really think of it you usually think of it as like an outside perspective of a guy, like he killed somebody, obviously he should get punished, probably life and whatever, but like, you don't think of it as the dude that actually murdered him and like what he could be feeling, like remorse, and like if he wants to recover, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. So, well, thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. That wraps up today's episode of Ahrens Analytics. And yeah, thank you for joining me, Connie.
Of course, man. It was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you again to our listeners. Be sure to follow us for more discussions on books and justice. Probably not. But yeah, until next time. Peace.